We're trying to build a world where AI could create a new class of almost digital labor that can augment the existing high-skilled labor force.
When you say, oh, I will create a radiologist AI agent, how are you going to look at multiple anatomies and multiple diseases and build an AI?
There are approximately 3,700 diseases you can see in radiology. You think about AI as labor. One way that we like to think about 5C is 5C is a radiology business that has two types of labor. There is specialized manual labor and there are AI agents. And both of them work together to deliver
a significant change even in the fundamental radiology machines, CT, MRI, X-ray, in the way it's been rendered, will go through a full innovation cycle.
We're so obsessed with this idea that my AI can see just like a human can, that we sometimes forget that, hey, your AI can see way other things that a human has no idea about. Like,
from a tech perspective, how much of this AI moat you can create which is narrow enough to defend?
I'll start with a couple of examples. If you look at Anthropic, ChatGPT, 11 Labs, Whisperflow, etc. Today, their second biggest market has all become India. There are essentially three narratives.
So thanks Sudhir and Kalyan for coming here and for this conversation and agreeing for this conversation. AI in radiology is I think one of the most hot topics, and people definitely want to understand a lot about that. We've already had a lot of interactions on AI in radiology as such. Today would love to understand the entrepreneurial journey behind going into one of the firms, and from your side in terms of the capital and how do you invest in all of that. I would like to start with, why don't you give a small introduction for our audience in terms of what do you do, and then we will have this conversation.
Sure. Amit, first of all, thank you for having me and glad to be here. Brief introduction, I'm Kalyan, founder of a company called 5C, based in South Bombay, BTM layout. And very briefly about me, I have a computer science degree by training and then a post-graduation in intellectual property law. And now I've started in healthcare. Coming to 5C, 5C is trying to build an AI assistant for every radiologist on the planet. It is very clear that diagnostics is going to become more and more important, and imaging is going to be a very central part of healthcare moving forward, even more central than it is today. And with the growing demand for imaging, the amount of high quality labor that we have cannot catch up fundamentally and structurally. This is where we believe that AI could create a new class of almost digital labor, a software worker, if you will, that can augment the existing high skilled labor force. And 5C is trying to imagine a world where, 10 years from now, people would actually look back and say, you know what, there used to be a time when we would actually not get our reports on time. We would actually have mistakes in it. Could you believe there used to be a time like that? We're trying to build a world where that conversation is possible, where diagnostics is accurate, is on time, is on demand, and is ubiquitous and available to everybody. So that's what 5C is trying to do.
Sudhir, can you introduce a little bit of...
I'm Sudhir Rao, an accountant. I don't have so much to talk.
What does Celesta Capital do?
Well, Celesta is, it's been over the last 14 years, we've built a family of funds. It's US and India primarily, investing in what is now, we use the words deep tech quite a lot these days, but we've been using that for 14 years.
Right.
But essentially, stuff that which is R&D intensive. It must address mass market requirements. And then we sort of anticipate that at the stage we're investing, this is very early. You would have seen a lot of effort on the science, or there is a background to effort that's already preceded us when we are investing. And then we're seeing a sort of a wave that comes in. And I would say 5C would represent that. 5 years ago, I think we never used the word AI as we use it today. But I don't think we didn't think about it or didn't act on it ahead of what's now mass market. So, 1 billion users, everybody understands the use of it, the power of it. But the hard work in the past that the team at 5C has done is really was focusing on the possibility. And I guess we'll speak more about that. But it's an example of what sort of companies we would invest in. We've done over 100 investments over the last 14 years.
Super. We'll come back to that for sure. And so, Kalyan, why radiology? Where did it start? Why 5C? What was the genesis of all of that?
So, I mean, post my degree in computer science, post law, I was a you could say semi-professional singer for a year in Bangalore. I was trying to figure out.
Oh wow! So we can have one song today or something like that.
That depends on how many views this podcast gets, and I'll probably pull it down. We have to be careful. So I was kind of figuring out what to do, and I was interested in working in healthcare because I'd already worked with the health department of Karnataka. So the health department of Karnataka has its own IT wing, you can call it. It's called the State Health System Resource Center. And I was actually working with the health department, and I was building apps for them. I was helping them write and spec out tender documents. And initially my idea was to actually get into ICUs. And so I was spending a lot of time touring the state and understanding the state of district and taluk hospitals. And I realized that there's a specialist shortage globally, but there's very specifically an intensivist shortage. And I was actually supporting a tele ICU startup, like a tele ICU tender in Karnataka at that time. And I realized that this is, the idea of remote medicine, high quality remote medicine at scale, is something exciting. At this point in time, I think one of my first lessons I realized was that it's very hard for a non-doctor to start an ICU business. And there's a business lesson behind this, which is that for an ICU business, you need synchronization in space and time. You need to be at a command center, and when the nurse calls you, you have to be available right then and there. Right. And so you can't tokenize work. The tokenization of work in an ICU is time. And at the same time, I was spending a lot of time on Kaggle and just doing fun competitive machine learning. And at that time, it started getting really hot. You would get these competitions where you'd get 250 CT scans, and they'd say, detect a lung nodule, or 250 or 300 mammography scans, and they would say potentially detect breast cancer. And this seemed very silly to me because everybody has they do the same thing in machine learning. You essentially take, at that time everybody would use either a ResNet or a DenseNet. You would take the same weights. Everybody would start with the best computer vision weights, ImageNet, and then you'd have to fine tune that. And to fine tune that, you have very little data. I mean, ImageNet as a weight base is trained on 1 billion plus images, which all look like, like the studio, colors, hard lines, etc. Radiology is very different. And so it was almost a futile exercise, and I kept talking to them about, hey, can we get more data? And it was just not available. And that kind of got me interested in radiology, and I quickly realized that there has to be a lot of work done to be in a position where you can actually build high quality AI for radiologists. And it starts with a massive amount of data, a corpus of data of high quality that does not exist in today's world, did not exist in today's world rather. And one of the ways for me to attain that corpus of data was, we realized that 5C could actually work in the online radiology space, the teleradiology space. And at a business level, it was exciting for me because work in radiology is tokenized, is quantized very nicely. A scan is a unit of work, and that allowed us to move units of work and not units of time, right? And that made all the difference.
And you had decided to be an entrepreneur already, or was it was something exciting for me to do. And so, for example, I wanted to. I had a lot of ideas on what to do, and then because of my time with the government of Karnataka, it just seemed the natural thing to do to work in healthcare. But I come from a family of government servants, and I'm actually the first, you would say, actual entrepreneur, if you would call me that. And it's not so much the desire to be an entrepreneur. It's much more the desire to want to create something. And you started with teleradiology. What was your early experience of this as a business, and how did that evolve? It's a hard business, right?
It's a hard business. It's a hard business, and there's a reason.
It's a service business as well.
And it was in India. It's almost a cottage industry business,
Exactly.
And so there are a lot of ideas, right? And one of the ideas that in one of my conversations with Sudhir, probably in 22 or early 23, that came out was that one of 5C's main aims, and I think he was able to.
You started 5C in 2018.
End of 17, beginning of 18.
2017.
One of the ideas that Sudhir helped kind of extract from my brain is one of the things 5C can potentially do is to convert the service of healthcare into the good of healthcare. And so if you look at and he showed me this chart of inflation. It's a very Sudhir thing. Mm-hmm. And the only things that have been inflated from I would say 1870 to now is essentially healthcare and education. The unit useful price of everything else has come down. It could be TVs, it could be shoes, it could be anything. Yeah. Primarily healthcare and education have inflated like crazy, and everything else has actually gotten much cheaper. And the reason for that is that everything else is kind of becoming a good, while healthcare and education have become much more a service. And one of the biggest contributions that 5C can do is to start converting the service of healthcare into the good of healthcare, right? And goods are replicable, goods are multiplicable. And so that's the exciting thing that we wanted to do. And coming to teleradiology, we saw that the industry was, like you said, very, very fragmented. Generally, even the largest players in the country were very small.
Absolutely.
Right? Very, very small. And it just seemed that, if somebody comes from an engineering perspective, it would be easy to scale this business. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to do it. We took on teleradiology from an engineering perspective. So, for example, how do you know when a radiologist is online? Right? Usually, most teleradiology companies will have these case coordinators who will call and say, "Sir, ma'am, are you there? Can I send a case?" And at that time, as the web was getting better, sockets became much more useful. And so it was just very obvious for us that, hey, I don't need any case assigners. I need to think of this much more as a live marketplace, and think about liquidity in this marketplace, and think of it as a product and an engineering problem. And so the moment a radiologist is online, I know what are my caseloads, and I know how to assign them. I know what they like, I know what they don't like, I know their specializations, I know their error rates, and I can make a much more intelligent allocation based on an algorithm, based on data. And so it just, like, once we got into it, we realized that this can be an engineering problem and not just a services problem. And of course, the idea was that we'd be able to build this essentially mathematical matrix that would act as a co-radiologist, and we are very much on track to do that.
Oh. No, super. But so I've been on the other side of this teleradiology business. So one of the things, right, in my reading about it, and I'd love to know, both of you are reading about it from very different perspective. But so teleradiology, one of the core value proposition of anything that tech is trying to do in healthcare, especially in service like a teleradiology, is essentially scaling the skilled. What I call as scaling the skilled is basically means we have a shortage of skilled people, in this case radiologists. They do about, say, X number of cases per day, and we can never produce enough radiologists in this one. This cannot happen with the size of, right? US has 25% of the world's radiologists. They still feel the shortage of radiologists, right?
In a very acute manner.
In a very acute manner, though they own 25% of the radiologists of the world.
Yep.
There are about 300 radiologists in Kenya.
Yep.
There are more lions in Kenya than radiologists. Right? So the problem cannot be solved by producing more radiologists only.
Yep.
You cannot, because that takes time, right? So one of the ways that tech people can think about is, how do you scale the skilled?
Absolutely.
Can they do much more?
Absolutely.
Than what they can, and how can tech help to achieve that? Teleradiology, in a way, does that to a certain extent. But one of the challenges I face is it scaling really enough in a profitable manner? What's your take on it? is teleradiology really scaling and remaining profitable for firms? What is the catch here? Because I see sometimes it's not doing as much.
I'll quickly start, and I think Sudhir will give us some even more interesting perspective. But I'll answer your second question first, which is that how do you think about profitability and scale in this business? In India, I mean, we all know this, that prices for scans are not really going up and up and up. Right? In many cases, actually coming down because of increased competition. We still have so much out-of-pocket expenditure. And so there is like a scan that costs 8,000 rupees to get done in India. The same exact thing of the same quality would be like $1,500 or something in the US. Right? But that's the world we live in. And we'll keep that aside. And let's keep in mind that prices are severely compressed. And then you have other market forces that significantly reduce the profitability of diagnostic centers. And so teleradiology is a really hard business because, and this may sound counterintuitive, but I'll finish my point. Teleradiology is a very hard business because no toilets in diagnostic centers are clean. And I'll explain this now. You know, when, as a business owner, how do you think about clean toilets? You think about clean toilets when you have a little bit of margin to invest. To have a clean toilet, you need to essentially spend 50K INR to have a clean toilet. Every time somebody goes, or every 2 hours, you need a rotational shift and the thing being cleaned. That only happens when you have margin and mind space, both. Yeah. Many diagnostic centers have neither margin nor mind space for this. And all vendors, therefore, below the line get significantly squeezed out. Radiologists, radiology, teleradiology is no exception. The only way to be able to build a super scale and a profitable business on this is to go disease backwards. You cannot think about teleradiology as teleradiology. You have to think about it as a category business, right? You have SKUs, chest X-ray, knee X-ray, spine MRI, brain CT. Absolutely. You need to understand the burden in each of your customers. What does disease burden look like? And you need to have the technology that allows you to maximize margins based on the categories that you are selling. So this is you need to have strong category thinking, strong disease backward thinking in order for you to scale this. So if you look at a small teleradiology setup, well-intentioned, good 2-3 radiologists, they're going to be looking at this as an outsourcing business. And they'll do the best they can. They'll be limited by, of course, the amount of manpower time that they have. And they'll make, I would say, 15 to maybe 25% gross margins at the end of the day. In order to scale this and scale this profitably, you need to have a delivery mechanism that is rooted in your understanding of disease burden and have the technology to address that cleanly. So for example, in our case, we are reading now 15 to 17,000 scans a day. So we're reading a non-trivial, maybe 2 to 2.5% of the scans that happen in India. Now that gives me a very deep understanding of the disease burden in this country and generally the disease burden in my customers. Now I know where I can optimize margin. I know what is the normal abnormal rate. In the abnormal rate, I know the 80-20 in the abnormalities. And I know what algorithms I need to build so that my radiologists can be significantly faster than they were with no help. And so that
And you see that happening?
Massively. I mean, there is no way that you can get, to 5 digit scans a day. And our aim is 6 digit scans.
So while growing this to 15,000 or odd scans per day, you didn't have to scale the number of radiologists at the back end to the same level.
You will
it did much lesser.
Yeah, it's not linear, it's logarithmic. Right? You can get less radiologists per unit of 100 cases.
So that's scaling the skilled in a way.
So the skilled are still there.
Of course they will need.
Absolutely.
But you are able to do more out of them.
Much more than it would be normal. And that is that's why this is a technology play, right? Exactly. I mean, you can think of this as initially it looked like an outsourcing play. And then when you understand the ability of a machine like 5C to be able to just deliver again and again and again, then you realize the amount of tech that goes into actually setting this service up. So I'll pause there and I'll just hand it to Sudhir for his thoughts.
You can start with another question, I guess. A lot of context has been set.
No, so one of the points that we are basically saying is that the scaling the skilled part is the value creation part, right? Now, for someone from a tech perspective, doing that needs a certain kind of patience and capital to invest in tech to achieve that, right? When you were looking at from an investment perspective in 5C, what were the things that you thought are promising enough that can create value? Because for you, at the end of the day, it's capital, so it's important that it has a return over some period, right? So which are the parts of value creation that you bet on while looking at this business?
Yeah, for us, I think we're not as complex a business as theirs. Because, about somewhere in class 4, you're taught how to compute interest and how do you calculate it. What is ROI? So from 8 to 80, it's the same calculus. There's no big change actually. IRR calculation has not changed substantially, unlike in radiology, imaging. So for us, that is going to stay. And that's simple. But I think where you start nuancing this whole conversation is what share of, first of all, how do you create value? How do you deliver that? And then, because you did it, your customers are willing to give you more than what they might give either the current provider of that product or service. And so that's sort of the stream that you want to think about, right? I think in 1999 is when I first encountered the idea of telemedicine. And that was actually just a simple idea that access not available. So how do you even work in managing this idea of physicality? And can technology, by which time you had the wired networks and then you had the wireless networks, but the healthcare system didn't have, even though it was working over there, you had the wired and the wireless systems in parallel, but when it came to healthcare delivery systems, they were in a very physical world. Like he said, I have to be here, I have to do it, so on and so forth. And interestingly enough, if you look at the history of radiology, which you know very well, by that time, now it's 75 years old, right? From when the Germans brought in either the X-ray or the British worked on the CT.
130 years old.
Yeah, so 130 years old. It's old. And I'm saying this 30 years ago. So machines had already come into the life of delivery systems, but they were just not connected. So the very simple pass in your head is, if I invested some capital on the connectivity, that would potentially have a return on capital employed, and customers around that ecosystem would benefit from fundamental communication. And in the scenario of teleradiology, there's transport of an image. So this access issue is not just the patient, but also the radiologist, the machine. And you're sort of, it's a bit of he explained, what did he need to do from an engineering standpoint. But from a non-engineering standpoint, if you did connect it, that would potentially create value.
Right.
Now, the first set of people who did that make a very different margin pool. But this is true in all, today there are 400 different types of coffee shops in Bangalore. Earlier we had to go to only 2 zip codes to drink coffee in this town. So there's a proliferation of supply when there is a native demand for something. If I look at healthcare, it's a fairly large spend. We're a $110 trillion economy. We're
And
spending
it'll only
about...
continue to increase, kind of.
It shouldn't. At the end of the day, I get 100 rupees. I should not spend more on my health. I should spend less. And that's really the proposition.
Yeah.
The proposition is you should spend less time at it, less money at it. Then we as providers are doing the right thing. If I'm going to take more money for the same thing and take more time for the same thing and lesser quality, then I should be out of the business.
No, that's very interesting. Do you think globally? I agree, right? This proposition. I would love to, from a philosophy perspective, I do agree that it should happen in India as well. But considering that we spend so less and so less access is there within the deep country, would we be spending more in healthcare as a country as a percentage, or you think we still will be able to? So technology might help us to remain constant.
Unfortunately, numbers are a little deceptive and that's what numbers are. We're a very young nation.
Yeah.
So just simply put percentage of GDP, you have to also think about what's the constituency of that GDP, right? So who's there? If I look at a more aging economy, their spends on health will be much higher.
Exactly.
So will this go up? Yes, if we age. If the whole economy sort of ages. Now, knowing this trend, we can do a lot of work proactively in a more preventive manner to avoid the idea of once this age comes, we must spend. So if I look at value pools, what value chains would I want to invest into? Right? So I'm just saying 5-10 years from now.
Yeah.
So if you could take a long trend that yes, we're going to age, then every counterintuitive step that you can provision on a pool of people is, from an actuarial science standpoint, is going to be much lower cost, significantly lower cost.
Interesting, yeah.
And so now you want to look at people like Kalyan and his team that have a wide-angled view with a very reasonable clarity of thought what that impact seek is like. So when I met him, let's say, I don't know, he was doing a few thousand transactions a day. And I said, there are 1.5 billion people. We should see more. And today it's like 15,000. It's still like 1%, like he said. Not enough. We have 3 billion scans a year now, globally. So if I look back 20 years ago, when we did not have that diagnostic machine set, which you put your life into creating that entire infrastructure. So these infrastructures that are required, if I look at cost of disease and the value that even one point like radiology has done, is very, very significant. Yeah. But that infrastructure has to come. Like if I come in from banking, if we didn't invest in POS terminals and in ATMs and in the digital infrastructure to transport value, you would have been, and we haven't stopped printing notes, by the way. It's a very expensive habit we have. We continue to do it. We don't get out of it very easily. Post demonetization, the notes in circulation, I think, is about 2x already. Post demonetization. So all the effort, despite the effort, or like, for example, in securities, right, public market securities, if we didn't dematerialize it and done transaction settlements through electronics, I don't know the level of fraud might have been. I wouldn't understand. I mean, we saw ample fraud in those days, back in the 80s, in the 90s, before when we started to focus on deploying this infrastructure. So, slightly longest answer, but when you want to look at that, you take a lens slightly longer, right? And then you work backwards a bit, and then you work forward a bit. And then you look for people like him to say, okay, Can you sort of take that view? So the first telemedicine setting that I was exposed to back in 2000, which we invested in and we delivered, was, I would say, very heartwarming. That a woman who had contracted cancer, and this was a cancer setting in a multidisciplinary care network for just one cancer type. The woman is at a place, the center of oncologists is another place, the surgical oncologist is elsewhere. You should just think about it. You need a surgical oncologist, you need a medical oncologist, you need a gynecologist, you need literally a person who can hold your hand, right, to walk through this, to give you the courage to walk through it. You need and then you got the oncoradiologist. So imagine now a multidisciplinary requirement, and we did this exercise in the early 2000s and connected everybody. Now this was called telemedicine, but the value to that lady to get a scheduled, when should the schedule take place? I still remember the surgeon saying she should be wheeled in. And he looks at his assistant and says, fix a time. So all this was on one box which we had built. And said, when can she be wheeled in? So he says, next Tuesday. And the gynecologist says, one moment. Are you just assuming that because you're ready, I have to prep her? I have to talk to my patient. I have to even prep her to be on a bed. So the radiologist said, this is a situation, but we know it. So there's a clinical, surgical, and then there is a patient-centric approach. Yep. And then technology in all of this is actually the stitch, the glue, expecting to deliver a level of service through machines, through data sets, and it's actually playing the stitch. So when I fast forward 22 years later,
I clearly see
Kalyan wanting to do that.
Exactly. I clearly see that early experience gave you the evidence of the value proposition.
Exactly.
Stitched in something like this, and when you saw this, the fundamental premise of value creation was similar.
Correct.
In terms of connectivity, which gave you the confidence. But what was the other things apart from this fundamental premise? And I can clearly see this experience really shaped that. What were the other things that you saw that made you comfortable to invest in 5C?
I think the interesting thing, the first time I was proposed by the idea to be investing into by a clinician. This time I was seeing an engineer. The clinician had the ability to be an engineer. That clinician. Not everybody can. This engineer had the possibility to become a clinician. That's what I saw. Because we needed to bring, data and domain together to solve a real problem. It's a difficult problem. And of course, it's the individual leadership that matters, but how fast can you build these multidisciplinary teams, or what smell do I get that we can get that? Do they have the intent, first of all? Once they have that intent, then it's much simpler to do that. You then take a look at all of the resources available at that point in time versus this point in time. So the degree of difficulty for us in the 2000s to sell the idea was much harder.
Yeah.
Right? So but 22 years later, when I meet him, or 26 years later, when I'm thinking about something today, there is a surround sound that I can work with, right? But I think we scope that idea into the future, along with another futurist, who then says, okay, what might it look like in 1,000 days or a 2,000-day time frame? And then we sort of narrow the lens to a time frame, because you got to deliver. When you can say, I want to do stuff, and you can be motivated by some death in the family. In healthcare, you keep hearing that story, that I got motivated. But, okay, fine. So if you're a clinician, you'll see deaths every day. If you're a morgue manager, you'll see deaths every day. That is not the motivation that you can sustain. Yeah. You have to sustain it in a very different manner altogether. and it's really his intent to apply the engineering that he has been trained on, or he's going to get to learn. It's not about what he was trained on in the past. You take that as a foundational effort, but it's, there's lots more ahead. Like I don't think when we started out, we would have smelt the power of the models that have moved today in our favor.
Yep.
But it's come as a favor. The question is whether we take this favor that somebody's given us for $200 per month, and I can completely change life for many more. So today, if he's doing a run rate of 4 to 5 million impact points with higher margin to us, by the way, higher impact for the recipient, higher productivity for the healthcare professional. It's that combination that you say that each stakeholder is actually winning from this proposition. Yeah. That's when probably we can make the idea of return.
No, I will come to you, because one of the things I don't want to forget is to ask you about, because when I was reading things I was very curious, is what made you do the law part, but we'll come to that. I get the imperative you have in terms of the VC structure and in terms of capital allocation. But from what I meant when I asked was from a role perspective, each one plays, I have seen that investors play a different level of role in terms of operational health, right?
I get your question.
Do you have any, and that might be, I don't know, I'm curious to know, and I'm sure those who watch are curious to know, is that it might change with each of your investment, because depending on your interest in that particular business, and also your estimate of what role you play in there. I want some nuances around those that Celesta in particular has, and you have in particular.
Yeah, Celesta has the background, overall background, if I say the talent pool inside our firm are drawn from people who have operated businesses. Most of our leadership has operated businesses and businesses at scale. So I think that's one part of the element. The second part of the element is, I think that our pool has attracted for itself people who are interested in this whole cycle of invention, innovation, and diffusion. Right? So I think we're aligned that there's a lot of work to be done in the maths, physics side of, and science, and bring it towards technology, then convert it into some engineering, and then add some math, and then there's money. Right? So there's this whole thing that stitches us. So we understand that the building blocks for value, which you talked about, right? How do you participate in economic development, if you may, in what do we want to do either for the planet or for people? And we then come back and then we thematically agree to some little things that we can do. We have to be very certain about how we wanted to go about it. And I think that allows us to then put a frame. And the canvas is now inside a frame rather than just a canvas. That I think is what happens when we actually place a structural sort of bounds under which we operate. Because otherwise the money doesn't flow, it doesn't come unlimited, do anything, I don't care. It doesn't work like that. We have a thematic. We say we're going to put our effort in this direction. So once that frame and the canvas is put in, then we're looking at different kinds of shots that can come into that frame size.
Right.
For example, yesterday, a friend of mine, after being in business for a long time, he now is a photographer, wildlife specifically, and he goes off on these journeys, and he sent us a message. He said, me and my friends who go and photograph are putting a small exhibition together. So we said, okay, we'll go there. My wife and I went there. Interestingly, there were all kinds of photographs, all wildlife, of course. So now there's step one. Step two, the size of every frame was same. Some were latitude, longitudinal, right? So, okay, scope was clear. And I could see a tiger, I could see birds, I could see Africa, I could see, maybe somewhere in my backyard. And there were stories that they were giving us for that frame. And when it came to saying, okay, I want to buy, every single thing was priced at 4,000 rupees, funnily, unlike in our world. And I said, why have you done this? He said, no, we're just a collective. Our entire money that we sell these photographs is going for a non-profit, for the Karnataka Wildlife Fund, to encourage us to participate in our environment, so that if these photographs are hanging on your wall, you will remember there is something called the planet, something called the environment, more than what we might be doing in my day job. So how many scans did you do yesterday? Right? So while I'm excited about 14,000 scans, have I also got that? And it was interesting. So I'm just saying, when we're putting capital, we've got a frame. It can't be the equal. It's not the same. In our world, it changes. Each one changes. The frame sizes are different. And they're all very amorphous. Some of them collapse. Some of them grow. Some look like a Dali, and some are rising. So
it might be a right time to ask Kalyan is, he has given the abstract version of how he Celestial Capital contributes, is very interesting. But to ask you, for example, you've, apart from capital, from Celestial, what are the top 2-3 things that you have gained because of this relationship in the last few years?
So, one of the biggest lies told is that the color of money is the same. It's a big lie. And so the color of money and the people who come with that money are often the difference between good money and totally useless money. And I think my interaction with Sudhir and the Celesta team, to be very specific, I have derived significant value out of the fact that the words are not empty. They are not, you should do this because of because of some analogy, right? They are doing this, so you do this. So there are 3 ways to think through. You either discuss by analogy, or you try to think through it through first principles, or the best, you tell from experience. And I'll give you a specific example when I knew that this would be a good, a very good relationship. So when we were finally discussing getting together term sheets, etc., there were multiple other investors also. And actually Sudhir and I were together working on our business plan, right? And we were like, there are so many, we have to hire so many sales guys, we need this much scale of data, we need to hire. At that point in time, Sudhir, I remember still telling me, we should have 100 annotators in our team. You should have a floor just to annotate data. And I was telling him, sir, you're nuts. I don't know what this is. He's like, no, you trust me. So I'm talking to a few other investors, and they're like, you want to hire so many sales guys? You want to hire so many annotators? Man, are you an asset-light business? I was getting all this. And then I came back to him. I still remember, it was like a rainy evening. I was in his office, and I was telling him, this is the feedback I'm getting. And he's like, sit down. And then he told me about this example from his previous days of selling mutual funds. He was one of the first guys to actually scale mutual funds in the country. He said, man, I'm asking you to get 100, 150 people. Now, I'm not trivializing it. When I think he was at that time 33 or 34, 35, around the same age. He said, over a span of 2 years, I hired 2,000 people. And I actually put them to work here. I know Karamangalam, I know Coimbatore, I know Tenkasi, right? I can tell you the names of the streets. I had people in each of those streets selling mutual funds in each of these areas. And so that's not a hollow, it's not a hollow thing to say, you just go scale, here's the money, you should be hiring people, right? And so at that point in time, I knew that, okay, I'm working with somebody who's seen what he's telling me. He's not seen something totally different. like he's been in a totally different space and now he's giving me some kind of analogous advice, right? This is like, I know how to hire these people. And, for all the amount of tech that, we generally speak, the first real thing that we worked on, you'd be shocked, was the schematic design of our CRM. It sounds totally analogous, right? So all our discussion was, what can tech do? So his whole thesis was 5C has to become a service as a software company. I want to repeat, service as a software company. And that's the theme of how 5C can be a world leader in this. So there are a lot of things we discussed. And I remember the first thing that we actually sat down on and was to actually discuss our CRM schema. So these are the tables we want. These are the variables in the tables. This is how I'm capturing data. These are the joins I want to do. This is what I want to extract. And from that schema comes a set of metrics that are therefore important to us to know input, output, outcome. And then, of course, for example, you are asking about what is your role, like how operational does a partner get? It's not like he does that now. And now we have found another fantastic investor who has now joined our board and who does this very regularly, works with me on incentive design, right? Comes to my kickoff meetings and says, I'm going to give the top guy a Tata curve, right? So we have guys like that as well, but we have to find those guys. And so I think that investor involvement in a company changes by company, of course, right? I've seen Sudhir interact with his other portfolio companies. All of them are in different shapes, different sizes, different roles that he's playing. Some of them are, going are like at a pre-IPO level. So I've seen his calls with them, and there he's an accountant. He's nothing but an accountant. And of course, in our case, he's very much he's like a futurist, thinking through what could happen. It also depends on what is the stage of the company and what does the company really need from a board member at that point in time. And I think that also matters a lot, and the best people are able to understand your energy and help you calibrate towards that. And that's very useful.
No, lovely. We definitely want to, and I am sure those who are watching this would also want to understand, how did you go deeper from teleradiology to this whole AI thing? And what was those pivots and what are you doing now? But before we go there, of course, I want to my personal curiosity of wanting to know, lawyer, where did that came from?
So it was just an interest. Now I have to, I'm shocked when I'm saying this, my generation of people, right? You're at that time you couldn't be a YouTuber, if you know what I mean, even when I was graduating in 2010 time, you did engineering or you did medicine. And I had taken, in 10th grade itself, I had decided I'm dropping biology. Surprising coming to think of it now. But
now you might want to revisit the this.
No, but I had to take computer science, right? And remember, this is an engineering problem. So, I dropped biology way back in 10th. And so it was either engineering or engineering. I had two choices. And my father actually told me this. He said, you can do anything as long as you're doing engineering.
You can buy whichever color you want unless it's black.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, incidentally, when I was writing my competitive examinations, one of the engineering competitive examinations clashed with CLAT, which is the law competitive exam. And I was like, I'm going to write CLAT. You never know what can happen in the world. And I remember my dad was like, son, there are some decisions you can make. This is not one of them. So go write the engineering exam. So I did that. And of course, engineering happened. And I had a bunch of options after. I was very lucky that I had a bunch of deferred admissions, which I didn't end up taking. But I had a bunch of deferred admissions that I could take up. And so I could essentially do anything I wanted for like a few years. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to, learn law. And now at this time, incidentally, my father had done this course. Yes.
Oh,
so when exactly. And so I had, it was a course from NLS, an intellectual property course. And so I decided, this is just something super
interesting. How long is this course?
So 1 year. I don't know if they offer it anymore, I have to check. So 1 year, and I think at that time it was 2 or 3 Sundays.
So And
2 or 3
it
Sundays
doesn't
a
have to
month.
be full-time work.
Doesn't have to be full-time, but I mean, the coursework was extremely intensive. I mean, and I had
And NLS Bangalore is fantastic.
it's fantastic.
place.
And I was taught by literally the fathers of like law,
Yeah.
IP law, etc. And I still remember.
Is that helping you now?
To some extent? For example, like, I mean, how do I
It
think
will,
of-
I'm sure, over a
how do I
period of
think
time.
about patents? For example, how do I think about IP patents in India? Right? Very different from the way I would think about it in the US because of the unique structure in India. Right? So do I want to spend time? Do I want to spend money on going down a patent route? Or would I rather, just treat these as trade secrets? Maybe apply for patents in places where it's a little more free. For example, in India, software patents per se are do not happen. You cannot get a patent for a software per se. The software has to be embedded in some hardware. And now we have worked with a manufacturer, and we have now embedded a bunch of our AI inside that machine, integrated all the way to the kernel. Now this is potentially patentable, and I understand.
And with DP and all those coming in, I think
This
there's a
will be
lot
much
of
more
implications
of edge AI.
of what you will do any
Exactly.
which ways, and we'll talk more about it. But if I see from numbers perspective how they are today in terms of number of people, you did mention number of scans you do to an extent, but overall where is 5C now?
So I'll start with number of people. 5C is today just a shade over 200 people, and today over 50% of our team is fully dedicated towards R&D, and that is the annotation of data, building, testing, validating of AI models, so that we can get them to a place where they can be deployed in real world.
So you're saying out of the 200 people, 100 people would be
100
engineers.
plus, yeah, over 150.
Engineers and R&D folks.
Some of them are biomedical engineers who are trained in annotation. So one of the interesting things about 5C, I keep joking with our HR team, is that we actually run essentially a training school. So I would say that the applied AI team at 5C is probably responsible for creating this profession of medical image annotator. And I remember Sudhir and I were having this discussion, and one of the things I learned was that sometimes going backwards to solve the root of the problem is not as hard as you think. And I remember we had this bunch of discussions about, how can I just create an annotator? It's impossible. And then he's like, okay, what does an annotator do? They do this. Okay, break it down into first principles. Tell me, why can't you train a smart, kid from Coimbatore or Trichy or Bangalore, an engineer? Why can't you give them a 5-month training course? If they do well, they are now an asset, and you have created a very unique skill set that you can monetize and they can grow into. And that was a discussion that me and my internal team had, and then we decided to go ahead with it. And a big number of my team are actually people who have annotation capability and then have some kind of GPU access. And so we've built a lot of tools that help you build models that already have preloaded weights, etc. And so as and when you start loading up data, and as and when you start processing it, you're able to see models churn out quickly, because speed of experimentation, like in AI, the biggest bottleneck is actually speed of experimentation. You push in an experiment, there are so many variables that people don't understand, right? You have the amount of time that you take in I/O, just reading and writing into a GPU card is actually very non-trivial. Then most AI engineers will not say this out loud, but I should. They just babysit GPUs. That they're just watching some compute happen, and it's the 2026 version of. There used to be this joke, like I would say 2004 types, would be like, I can't do anything. My code is compiling. What do I do? My code is compiling. Like, what do I do now? My model is in training.
Yeah, the way the Anthropic CEO is talking about, we all will be just babysitting.
No,
in
no,
couple of years.
But
we'll come to
if
that.
something is running, how do you run multiple experiments?
Exactly,
Right? And so we've built a lot of tooling around that even some of my annotators now have access to. And then the rest of them, of course, we have AI engineers whose job it is to actually do this, to actually build the models. We have people who are building harnesses. So to give you some context, a model is, in today's world, is not a model, right? The model is not the model. A model is actually an actual model plus the harness around it plus the context you give into it. And so we have dedicated teams working just on model harnesses, which is the best way to optimize the utilization of a model. I do a lot of work with this team now, and I'm very excited about the applied AI applications. Given a model, how can I get the best out of it? In what situations, in what capabilities can I expose to get the best out of this? And I'll give you a simple example. You have it's a very simple example. You have a model that can say, read a bunch of things on a knee x-ray, right? Now this model has been trained on data across, from various different types of x-ray machines, from all types of diseases, etc. So you have a representative data set that has trained this. Now, how do you build a context and a model around it, a harness around it that can allow this model to do its best work? And I'll give you a simple example. Maybe you can build a system that applies a Laplacian to the X-ray. So suddenly your edges get hardened. Now maybe it will be the case that Laplacian will allow you to detect, let's say, fractures better. Again, it's a simple example, but we do a lot of experimentation with these kinds of things, right? What if you put a high pass filter or a low pass filter? You don't just pass the knee image, you pass it with a high pass filter to see whether it catches XYZ better. And so we do a lot of work on not just the model, but in the application of the model that we build in order to try to get the best outcome.
So a lot of those people who I'm sure are listening to this podcast, a lot of them come from healthcare background, right? And they might not understand the engineering aspect as much. To make it as simplified as possible from a tech perspective, what are few things that you're currently doing that, going back to our discussion of enabling the scaling the skilled as well as enabling the value creation of teleradiology as well as using AI? Can you explain like 2 to 3 things? I of course read Bionic and few stuff about what you're doing, but can you explain like what are the tech bets that you have taken from creating value in this whole value chain?
See, what 5C is trying to do is we are trying to create a radiology or a radiologist as an AI agent, right? Now this means very simply that this algorithm or set of algorithms, this agent that we build, should be able to consume an image, understand the image, reason through what could be in that image. So reason through not just like a human saying, hey, you know what, I'm seeing this, but it could be that. For example, in a chest x-ray, differentiating between a nodule and an end-on. Now, the end-on is in the hilar region or near the hilar region, while a nodule could be somewhere else. Now, identifying a finding, reasoning through it, looking at priors, looking at past information, and then coming to a actual draft report is basically the work that my team is trying to do. Now, we imagine this as one big unified system.
But from a radiology perspective, right? And the hard part of it, and now probably I'm using my radiology knowledge, is, as you rightly said, it's not about, it's multiple diseases.
Yep.
Right? It's multiple anatomies.
Yep.
Right? Building an AI, from whatever little I have seen, building an AI for just one application, in one anatomy, like a chest x-ray, to just differentiate between normal and abnormal, is in itself a huge investment to make an AI.
Absolutely.
Or used to be.
It's a non-trivial thing.
I nowadays always say within 1 or 2 months your chance of knowledge is outdated many times with this kind of progress happening. But certain things fortunately don't change. The chest doesn't change, the anatomy doesn't change.
Sure.
So now that kind of investment, even if they might have come down now from times that I knew, which was not too long ago, but what all do you plan to encompass when you say, oh, I will create a radiologist AI agent? How are you going to look at multiple anatomies and multiple diseases and build an AI? Isn't it like huge?
So the original plan before, transformers and the way transformers work, RNNs, etc., was that there are approximately 3,700 diseases you can see in radiology. Okay.
Oh, lovely. You've looked
Broadly,
at numbers. Okay.
Right? Build a model for each of them. How much, how hard can it be? Right? We have seen each of these anatomies. We have seen each of these pathologies. In many cases, we have seen.
I think it's important to understand before this model effort really took place, was the history of this company from 2018. It's important to get that into the
yeah,
conversation. So today, let's say we have about 25 million scan data because of the old teleradiology. So you transported these images, it went to a radiologist, that person bunged in a report, you have their view on it. So you have that first annotation, which was the reason why the idea that when we looked at it, we said, when we ingest all this information inside, you can then, the whole idea of these data tables, etc., is about that. Unless you start seeing it from a engineering and a math standpoint, it will remain a domain of healthcare. The question is, by bringing in this discipline that they have, to look at it in a certain mechanical manner, if you may, right? And take every nuance that's possible, but it's not the English word nuance, you have to give me bounds. So you keep improving your appreciation, you will get from 90, 92, 94, and every then 100 basis points is so hard to get to 99, 99.99, so on and so forth. So, but you want to get to that position when it's ultimately not hallucinating, almost. Right? Yet we will run an override button with a human saying, because this is something that somebody's life is going to depend on the prognosis that comes out of this, right? So I think it's important to understand how we've imagined the use of a data system thinking, engineering it, and then delivering it, and then being careful about it. So to your question, ultimately we have history, fortunately. In this business, they were all machines that we were taking from. So it's easier for me to take a bet, or this invest, not a bet, but this investment to be made, because it was reasonably finite. Unlike, imagine another scenario where I'm trying to look at care protocols for oncology. Write new clinical care pathways. I'm talking about the challenge we had in the 2000s. That is harder, let me tell you. Because there's a medicine, there is a surgical procedure, there's radiology there, there's pathology to look at. We were still at that point in time, no influence of genomics, and so this whole thing of moving in a multi-omic way to look at healthcare is something that we forecasted. But we would begin with what we have.
Absolutely.
So it's not so difficult to say, okay, take step one, take step two. And I think that's important. The history is critical for us when we were investing, is what I'm trying to understand his personal history, his personal interest, his access, and then what had he already achieved by the time we met.
Of course.
And it was a mountain of effort with a theoretically low output, right? But first gear, the engine, has many revs per second. The distance traveled is very minimal, but that's the intent, because you're trying to create this entire heavy lift of the entire automobile or the vehicle. That's what we saw, that there was this mountainous effort already completed. But then after that, we would continue to put in more effort, but directed. And so when we say, I think your question is outstanding, because what do you start with? Where do you go? And that's always a question that any board would also have.
Exactly.
Which is, there is opportunity, but what is the risk associated with it? And what is the profit that's going to come from it? And then you say, okay, risk adjusted, profit adjusted, loss taken, capital invested, and then you do some math around that and say, okay, let's go for this.
But you're saying something very powerful, in if I get this right, is you're saying the estimated or your belief is that the investment needed, two things. One, technologically you see it's capable to do all of this, 3,700 diseases, and a radiologist becoming a radiologist AI agent. You don't see that as a very difficult thing from a technology standpoint to achieve. But not only is not very difficult, which is probably today comprehensible with the kind of tech development happening, but you're saying the cost to do that, equation of doing that is today on the profitable side. You can see that the cost to do this is manageable considering the value it can create.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
You should give the example. I still remember early days when he was building models and we were sucking up. See, it's all nice to talk model, but you suck water and energy for it.
Yeah.
And the guy charges you for it. He's called Amazon Web Services. And he's got people who he says he's got, right? There's some mechanical Turks and there's some people as well. And I asked him, I said, and our bill for modeling was just moving. I still remember at that point in time, it had moved from a few lakhs a month to some 30 lakhs. I said, I just asked one day, what's the bill we are paying for this energy cost and people cost? He said, so 30 lakhs a month. No, it was about 40 lakhs a month. I said, 5 crores a year?
Yeah.
Like, what are you
I had
getting?
Similar experience
So I
coming
said,
from business. I said, like, what is this?
I said, assume you don't have the money. First, I can't make Mr. Bezos buy his next yacht.
That's not our
happening.
job.
That's not our job, I told her. So I said, you sit back and come back. Do you know what? Literally in about 45 days, they brought that meter back to, I think, 7 or 8 lakhs.
Because of tech?
Because of thinking through.
The way thinking
First
through.
principles.
I think that, I mean,
Wow.
you have to just have
That's a huge goal.
big learning for me, because you just have to have agency to do it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, like any other agent, my first answer
you're
was,
trying to solve that
that's the
problem.
cost, that's the cost that I'm paying.
Yeah.
And then he's like, no man, you don't have the money, or let me tell you, if you continue like this, you will definitely not have the money.
Which is true, right?
And so what do you do? So I said, okay, I mean, this is a problem very much in controllable domain. So how do we think about multi-cloud architecture? How do we think about object storage?
You had to change the architecture.
Completely. How do you think
And
about,
you did that.
how do
Every
you-
partner.
like multiple partners.
Supply chain shift.
Not many people have the resistance to do that, to change the architecture.
Yeah.
I've been in the room to do that.
You know why, right?
And I had a very similar, I don't want to give the exact number, but it's a little lesser number than this, but not much lesser, little lesser number. I came from a business background running P&L, and I said, what the hell is this
Kya
per month?
Exactly.
How can a firm with this revenue ever become profitable with this cost? You know, typical business thinking, right? And I'm also a Gujo on top of it. So, I was like, what the hell is this? And if we don't find, and it was again the same, right? AWS and Google, this, 2 to 3 players,
Absolutely.
who whatever you do, they earn.
Correct.
Right? And I was like, how can we sustain something like this, right? And one of the answers, I mean, when trying to go to the root cause of it from a business side, but as a leadership team, and one of the things came up was that the architecture in which we made this is something that we need to change. And I was pleased, right? But there's a lot of resistance in general from many, obviously, because you don't want to change the architecture, because changing architecture is scary probably from a tech side perspective. It's great that you kind of managed it, but that's perfect. So these are some of the things in which these were some core problems probably that you solved to really make this possible.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's probably
How do you bring down, in the end, I'm transmitting these scans, and these scans can get really big, right? Today we are at over a TB of data transmission a day, right? Which means that 1 TB comes in, and then 1 TB goes to radiologists, 1 TB goes to my annotators. So I have data flowing in and out, at like nobody's business. And so I need to figure out who are the guys who can work with me to allow me to be flexible, scalable, and at the least cost. Like here, right? The famous Indian saying, right? I want cheap and best. Cheap and best. That's all I want, right?
I want a Mercedes is the price of
there is
Toyota.
exactly zero customers of mine have said, I will only work with you if you work with such cloud player. They are not part of my,
They don't care.
They care about, like, my big customers will say, give me HIPAA audit, give me ISO, okay, fine.
No, they will take that, but which
They
service
don't,
you?
totally immaterial to them, right? And so, I actually think, like, since we're on this topic, some of the resistance to this, right, comes from, I mean, Jeff Bezos famously started AWS with the things that make your beer taste better. If you're a brewery, you need to focus on your beer. Don't focus on all the other things. And that was like a fundamental thing about why you should work with cloud and not kind of build your own setup. Now, building your own setup is at this scale is genuinely very expensive, no doubt. But I feel like many times engineers take that logic, and speaking as an engineer, many times engineers take that logic to obviously, I should only focus on the things that make my beer better. Yeah, but your brewery shouldn't run you out of business, right?
Yeah. That's not, exactly.
We actually yanked back server to the office. I said, no, you bring on server. I said, what do you call these guys? They have all these fancy names of these guys. So I said, I don't know, man. What is DevOps? I said, what is the DevOps engineer's salary in Seattle?
Yeah.
Or where AWS is hosting your product? Whether it's in Timbuktu or and tell me how much will it be in BTM layout?
Yeah.
Because we have DevOps engineers sitting in somebody else's facility managing DevOps of somewhere else. But he's charging you at $150,000 a pop.
Yeah.
He may be getting the profit because he gives it out here at $20,000. Yeah. You might be able to do it at $10,000 because you don't need to go into a very fancy...
Your earning is in rupees, you're spending in dollars.
Because his lunchroom is only one meal. It doesn't have 45 options.
Exactly.
So that burden of cost, he doesn't have. So I said, bring it back here. And at that point in time, you're saying, really, I'll come back to infrastructure. What's my core? Should I not make models? I said, whatever. And I can tell you, this ping pong is important.
This ping pong is very important.
This ping pong allows fantastic rallying. That's when a game also gets super exciting for everybody.
Yeah. This is a perfect leeway to get into a little more detail about which is the business model. As a business model now, and future of AI as well, we'll get into that. But as a business model now, this one, where do you see this really the value pool scaling? Where do you see your business coming from? Be it from a geographic perspective, be it from the tech perspective of solving a particular kind or, and as we were talking, probably my team was talking to you in terms of whether it's specialized area like a cardiac.
Is it more generalized?
Or is it more generalized in scale? The hardware that you said, you made a great point, is that that we did some hard work of putting hardware when we were working in companies like GE and all of the Philips, and that hardware is about the good news I can give, at least from an India perspective. The hardware is going to get more and more into tier 2 and tier 3 cities as more affordable hardware is being made and focused by all of these companies, which mean more data points for you,
more
connecting value for you, which is a great news. But how do you prepare for it, and where do you focus from a business perspective now? Not from a tech just perspective, but business perspective, in terms of where is your money going to come from?
Okay, I'll start all the way from what is the model of business in what I think in the new age. I think the model of business in the new age, if you're selling intelligence, like you're not selling, there's goods, there's services, and now there's intelligence. If intelligence is the product that you're getting, I think that companies that do well will probably have a vertically integrated product stack with horizontal distribution. So for example, what that looks like in 5C is, I own data collection, I own data annotation, I own model building, I own deployment of the models, I own reinforcement learning with human feedback, and I hold that loop very tightly, vertically integrated product. And we have to distribute it horizontally in multiple ways. Today, the main route of our distribution is our teleradiology business. I'll come to that in a second. We have now we just signed up with BPL to embed all our AI, some of our AI, what is approachable and what is manageable inside a resource constrained environment, on edge, deployed already with customers and happening. And we think edge AI will play a much bigger role. And we have a couple of other bets that we have here. So that's at a business model level. Now, fundamentally, it is our thesis at 5C that AI is not the next version of software. Right? I want to repeat, AI is not the next version of software. AI is a new version of labor. And the way you sell that looks very different. Right? So the next version of software, and many of the good AI companies are also doing this, is you go to a hospital, and I'm going to take the example of radiology. You go to a hospital and you say, hey, I will read something like this for you. I'm very good at TB. I'm very good at fractures. I'm very good at brain bleed. And so I will detect that and you pay me for that. Point solution is the model. Now, the new wave of AI is changing this, because the reason point solution companies exist is because they are data restricted. It's not like, a company that is very good at identifying fractures has some inherent deeper understanding of the way cortical breaks happen. They just have only fracture data. Now 5C is...
They could afford fracture data.
And they bought that data.
They bought that
data. Now 5C's case, it's essentially, we have a fire hose of data flying in every day. So we don't have to be limited by point model thinking. Second, if a model can do much more than a point model, how are you thinking about this, right? One way to think about it is to again license it out to a hospital or a diagnostic center and say, hey, my AI will do some of the work for you, but you're not sure how much of the work because you still need a radiologist. It's not software. But if you think about AI as labor, one way that we like to think about 5C is a radiology business that has two types of labor. There is specialized manual labor and there are AI agents, and both of them work together to deliver an outcome. And so the concept of service as a software, I think, is where a lot of value in AI will get created, which is that if you are a company that has the pipeline of access to customers, you're already delivering a valuable and important, useful service to them, the ability for you to completely transform the margin profile, and even more importantly, the delivery capability of that business through AI, I think the winners will look a lot like that, because they will be companies that have manual labor and that have AI labor working with them. And I think that is a thesis that we are driving towards in 5C, because we think that the product, right, the outcome of this product will be that no radiologist should read a case cold. Right? Reading a case cold is one of the main reasons why people make mistakes, right? You start literally from scratch. And radiologists, like most, high-end cognitive professionals, essentially do two things and not one. They have to read and synthesize a report, and then they have to check they have to validate that what they're saying is correct. And you never, if you can, you don't check your own answer paper, because you've already made that mistake. And so if we can take up the first problem and say, I will synthesize, and I want you to use your expert judgment to model this the way it must be finally delivered, and this can take much less time than the larger structure. That's where I think this is going.
So tell me one thing, from a business perspective again, right? Are you currently in medium term? And I know, startups will pivot in life, and they should. But from a medium term perspective or short term, radiology will be your focus? That's all? Or
imaging.
Imaging, would you, are you looking at capturing that space, or when you say you just did a tie-up with BPL, and are you going beyond imaging also to have AI services? Where do you see your business kind of coming from? Imaging, right? Mostly.
Maybe I'll add a point over here. So the way radiology is currently in the spectrum, right, of healthcare is a bunch of machines, right, built over the last 50 years.
We discussed $12 to $13 billion balance sheet of machines in the country.
Yeah, this country alone has invested about $12 billion. Not just India, but if you look at the overall landscape. Now, over 50 years, you've had leaders like the companies you worked with, Philips, GE, Siemens, and there are many more. And there are some standards that they're all supposed to adhere to, which we assume is there. However, every single company is also a technology company working at the next from
they themselves are building a lot of AI.
Exactly. So, and they will do it in their product. I think what therefore arrives to the patient finally is, for solving a problem of a issue relating to their disease, If the CT scan is being used for oncology purposes, it's very different from the MRI being used for a completely different reason, or the X-ray being used for a fracture.
Yes.
Arthritis, aging is very different, the reason. Now, the way it's got built up, allopathy has been built up over the last 100 years. It's been very deep focused on the science and the experiment, and that switching its track around that, which is the right thing to do as far as that was concerned. But we lost homeostathos.
Yeah.
We lost understanding the pain that is being expressed by the patient. My belief is that these have to converge now.
Yeah, very much.
So I believe that
Amazing.
the therapeutic side operates somewhat patient-centric, but some of that also has come, if it's disease-led, then it's disease-led, or anatomical-led. But I see this convergence. Now, what's the opportunity for a 5C? So in the interim path, like I said, the first 2,000 days was to completely move as much as you can to get as many machines, which are all heterogeneous, different, normalize them. But then at the back end, you can see it like a spreadsheet table. You transpose it to by disease. I think we've yet to unleash the power that comes when you start to think about being part of a care pathway and not
More
just
systemic
as
in
more care
nature.
pathway.
Yeah.
We're not embedded into a care pathway. The care pathway is sitting in the healthcare system at best, which also is broken between IPD and OPD. Right? So all diagnostics is done in OPD, minimally done at IPD for the purposes of quick reaction times for what I need on the bed, if you're on the bed. How much is being done elective? How much is being episodic? Is actually, if you think about this entire issue, so for me, the first 5-year path was get your layering on top first, if you can. What 5C has done exceptionally well, I would say, is a number of machines in a number of point of care settings that we've been able to go in on that machine, just do a point service, give you a report at the end of the day, faster, quicker, cheaper, better, all of those words. But I think what's coming back, all at the end of AI, is that agentic side of it, it'll do better. But I think what we get back is a very different perspective of population health. How can we participate now? So I would see 2.0 emerge. It's not there yet, but I see a massive opportunity which is participating in the disease management. We're at the moment extending ourselves into radiology workflows, radiology management, not just the reporting, not just the one report, but we're doing that at scale. So once we do 5, 10, 50 million scans, you're sitting in the setting, and that is a very different play. Because now 14,000 people are walking in somewhere, but they're getting tagged. And if they need more benefit, I should be actually saying, when should the next scan take place? We're not in that. And radiology is not in it, unfortunately, as a whole science. It's missing its role, if you may. Unfortunately, it's been shifted into just a laborious machine friend kind of thing. And I think we will decouple that once the agent takes it over rather than the radiologist doing it. The radiologist will evolve to participating in that multidisciplinary care program that I was talking about.
It's
which
amazing.
Which
it's
is 25
amazing
years
for
ago.
me. I must say, it's amazing for me to see a non-healthcare per se person like Sudhir coming from the kind of depth he has gathered about healthcare and medtech. First of all, I must compliment you from the way he's able to look at this in the depth, and there's a lot of things converge in my thinking about very similar I don't want to call it American way, but in the sense the Western American philosophies have done a great job in going deep in a narrow
Like he
point,
said, allopathic,
as he said,
deep.
right? But there
Important
was
but not sufficient.
important but not sufficient. But the systemic way of looking at things,
Yeah.
which is extremely important, because at the end of the day, when you have a fracture, there is a pain that is across,
Correct.
and there is it impacts the entire body. He's looking at the holistic way,
Correct.
which probably was earlier in the Eastern, so-called Eastern philosophies, but probably got lost because of the institutional development didn't
Sure.
happen, in my opinion. But now those converging is very important, and it's amazing.
And
how
you have to
those
just stop and
technology-
stare at this, Amit. It's like 7, 8 years old.
Yeah,
Okay, you have large enterprise with 50 years old in this business.
yeah,
This is 7, 8-year-old. But at 7, 8-year-old, a 7, 8-year-old is young.
yeah, very young.
They have the wisdom possibility of population scale management.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we are in over 2,000 care settings
Yeah.
where patient flow is in and out. 2,000 plus. So we're not talking about, one way of looking at it is 1 terabyte, and that's his expression. My
Are you
expression,
not tempted to go global? Or
yeah,
you are?
without doubt.
Without that.
Why would you do this?
Yeah, exactly.
Is care for humanity a problem? Should it be local? No, I don't think so. Care for humanity is global. Why is GE and Siemens everywhere?
Exactly.
So why would 5C not be everywhere?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think what we're doing is we're serving first 20% of the global population.
Mm.
Yeah.
And in that, we have
Learning all
we have scale. We have population scale. 15,000 scans, 2,000 centers is scale. It is and heterogeneous. So I can see every machine. So they will arrive at their wisdom. At this point of time, if you look at the pyramid, if you look at the stack, you start with data, then you go to information, because you connect two pieces of data. Then you go up a little more and say, I can look at information, with some patterns, and so can I interpret it differently? And then you say, oh, now I've become intelligent. And then you say, hang on,
Yeah.
do this again, and you do this again and again, and you say, okay, now this intelligence is there, but we're putting in the field. So putting this back in the field in Tiruchengod and putting it in the field in Tinsukia, and also in Bangalore, Bangalore 1.
Yeah, 56001.
In 56001. So you can do it in any zip code. The environment, the culture, the clinician, the capacity, the literacy of each stakeholder is at such varying levels that the heterogeneity that we are seeing allows you to actually become wiser. Because it's in the failure.
That's
it's-
the moat, I think.
That is the huge moat. The beauty for this entity is that we're doing this on standard machines which are in Lithuania and Slovenia. If they're in Tinsukia, they're also there.
Yeah.
So the possibility of contributing in an extremely compelling way globally, I don't think we can. We are sitting at a period, and I'm very happy that 5C has been chosen as part of the team that's going to what is called Bharat Innovates to Nice in France later this month, and Kalyan and Anand are going there. And today when he sent a message, so on the post on the LinkedIn, I said, I'm so glad to be, and I'm just doing this thing with you as well today itself. But I put it out saying, I don't think very rarely, sometimes you get this opportunity to be at, a large contributor.
Of that, yeah.
To be able to contribute at a very large scale. That doesn't happen in everybody's life, unfortunately. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity, A, healthcare, B, definitely where you're using engineering, technology, and math. C, you're doing it at scale in this country, in India, big scale, big variety, big, seriously, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And then you're doing it in machines that exist everywhere else. So the potential, in my view, he can state it in his view, is, I won't say limitless, but again, if I were to put the next 1,000-day sprint, what's going to look like? I think we'd look different, let me tell you that much.
Yeah.
How different is something that I'm going to leave it to him.
The burden of how different is on Kalyan.
The board members will say, no, be different.
I think the opportunity will come.
Opportunity. No, I think this is a terrific conversation in terms of and terrific progress I see from an operational perspective and and the goals that you have. From a technology perspective, there seems to be so much of discussion and progress. And the milestones in your conversation seem very clearer to me as I speak now with you on all these fronts. What would be similar thing from a business milestone perspective? What is your next business milestone while doing all of this, right? Because and I understand the North Star should be the operational one.
Sure.
The North Star should be the technology one. But as we discussed earlier, the business has to go for it to sustain.
Correct.
That 40 lakhs has to come down to,
to
10 lakhs,
Correct.
and you found those ways. But what is the business milestone for 5C?
So I'll start with, from a geographical perspective, one of our theses for since 23 has been that India for scale and the world for sale, and that's been a standard. It's been a refrain repeatedly. And even in board meetings, one of the things that you'll always look at when you look at numbers will be average order value. And in India, these numbers are very small, right? Compared to the US, which are maybe 20, 25x per case. In many other in other developed economies.
India has the volumes, which is helping you for a long time.
And so the perspective is like initially it was okay. How do we prove that this is the model and this is the thesis that can not just prove that we are the biggest in India. In the end, that's some kind of vanity metric, right? How can you prove that this is so compelling that there is no other way to do radiology but this? Like Fantastic. The way that you do radiology, it should be the way.
And that's probably your core of differentiation
Correct.
as well.
Correct.
In a way that you're talking about is to how this converges.
Correct.
Right?
That's one. Second is in the landscape of fast moving, fast growing business at least, and especially technology businesses, I think we are very much of the opinion that moat is a verb and not a noun. It's not a thing you have, it's a thing you have to work on every day. And so the moat is a verb. You have to have a moat, like you said, our ability to have all this scale and use that data in order to improve our delivery mechanisms, in order to then improve our scale, has to be a verb. So we have to keep getting better at that. But I would say that, the first absolute business goal specifically has to be, this business should be profitable at a super scale, right? Showing profitability at medium scale is fine. It's good proof point that this thing. But at a scale of, reading 10% of India's, this model that 5C has built, the way we do radiology,
fair enough.
Should be like
saying that a certain percentage of scans I should be reading is a business.
But more importantly, it should come out of the fact that this is the best way to do it. And 5C should be 5C should be critical national infrastructure, right? Because it is the best way to do, the best way to transmit current is in the way that it is currently being done today, right? There's a way to transmit AC current or DC current. The way to transmit radiology, to do radiology, we want to find that way, which is the most efficient, the most capital efficient, the most time efficient way to do radiology. And that should become critical infrastructure, which will then hopefully reflect in the percentage of scans that we do, etc.
No, that's lovely. And which would be the biggest challenges in getting to that point?
So, in India, we understand we understand the knobs and the levers very well. I think that, we have to continue to have the focus to continue to connect machines and give them the best service at all times. And that challenge scales and changes as your business grows. Like the way I will do this at 15K a day will actually be very different from the way I would do it at 35K a day. Right?
So scale will bring its challenges.
Scale will,
which you have to rethink about the way you serve,
absolutely.
even from a tech
the way we evolve, every model, every operational model will be tested. And so I think that we have to be nimble enough and just keep telling ourselves that what got us here will not get us there. And I think that is, that's a repeated challenge. You feel like you've gotten to a point and you think you know what works. And then, very quickly you need to turn around and say, hey, actually, this won't take me to the next milestone. So I just got to figure it out. And again, the thesis that this is not just the best way to do it in India, this is the best way to do radiology, period. Which means that this is an exportable model. So can we serve? We've had the honor, the ability to serve patients in this country. Can this be a model to serve patients in all countries? Because like you said, the US, for example, has 25% of all the radiologists and they have an acute shortage. So does Britain, so does Japan,
everyone, right?
so does Philippines, so does Australia.
And it's not true just for radiology, any specialty.
Any specialization.
There's a huge scope to scale. The advantage of radiology is data, as you mentioned, is
focus to continue to connect machines and give them the best service at all times. And that challenge scales and changes as your business grows. Like the way I will do this at 15K a day will actually be very different from the way I would do it at 35K a day. Right?
So scale will bring its challenges.
Scale will,
which you have to rethink about the way you serve,
absolutely.
even from a tech
the way we evolve,
perspective.
like every model, every operational model will be tested. And so I think that we have to be nimble enough and just keep telling ourselves that what got us here will not get us there. And I think that is, that's a repeated challenge. You feel like you've gotten to a point and you think you know what works. And then, very quickly you need to turn around and say, hey, actually, this won't take me to the next milestone. So I just got to figure it out. And again, the thesis that this is not just the best way to do it in India, this is the best way to do radiology, period. Which means that this is an exportable model. So can we serve? We've had the honor, the ability to serve patients in this country. Can this be a model to serve patients in all countries? Because like you said, the US, for example, has 25% of all the radiologists and they have an acute shortage. So does Britain, so does Japan,
everyone, right?
so does Philippines, so does Australia.
And it's not true just for radiology, any specialty.
Any specialization.
There's a huge scope to scale. The advantage of radiology is data, as you mentioned, is historically the data is being captured.
Yep.
While in many others the data is very difficult.
I may add another. The next 5 years, you will see a significant change even in the fundamental radiology machines, the CT, MRI, X-ray, in the way it's been rendered, will go through a full innovation cycle, I think. The number of devices will shift. So devices, as the way we construct them today, that's going to be history almost. So you will see this wave of, let's say, wired to wireless. So to me, allopathic diagnostics is going to morph substantively. And so we're going to have machines, chemistry, methods, genomics, data points, all sort of, interestingly, they will all come together closer to point of care, closer to where the patients are, not where the machines are,
So
or
you're
where the
saying
hospital
it's
is.
more, even a big capex equipment will become more portable.
Miniaturization.
There'll be a need, and if you look at the south of every geography, so not you say global south, it's not some patchy place. No, every New York City has a global south of it.
Yep.
Which Mamdani talks about. That needs service. That is underserved. And the infrastructure, the service cost, the methods, the processes, the data sets, the algorithms, the protocols, the clinicians, the HCPs, all are in a blur, if you ask me. So the adjust that's required the economic adjust required is likely
reinvention.
Is necessary, right? So you're rethinking. It's like Arvind Eye Care had to create, intraocular lenses
At a
at
price.
1/30th the price. And now, it allows avoidable blindness across 150 countries. We have that opportunity again in 5C as well. And
100%.
time and again, you're going to see more of this coming out of India. So if I were to think about the next 50 years of allopathy, undoubtedly this is going to have to shift,
Yeah.
because
It's a
before,
shift on tech side
Yeah.
and shift on delivery side as well.
every
Yep.
single element.
Right, because people, I see a lot of, I get some experience thankfully to do this new work, inside tribe work I get is, I look at delivery side as well and work help with them. People are continuously thinking, and especially in India, how do I deliver healthcare differently? And that's not necessarily on tech based, just business model based
Innovation, yeah.
innovation, so that I can serve a purpose, because no one has been doing that till now, right? We have been taking a template out of a different world, which had a very different cost and value positions, and applying to ours, and happy with the segment that resembles that segment and serving only that. But now that wouldn't be enough, as you.
I mean, if you think about
rightly
it,
said.
from X-ray and CTs, which are very structure oriented, and then MRIs went to metabolic activity. We have a company in our portfolio called Magnetic Insight, which is inventing on the concept of cell activity monitoring, and with a completely new range of SPIOs as tracers. Now that's still early days, I would say, but if that happens, it's upending quite a bit.
Yeah.
If I look at the way drug discovery is going on, or drug development is going on, it's starting from the cell now, because of the computational capacity
has changed
that's
the
getting
world.
available.
Yep.
And so it's no longer, we're not constrained. I'm not saying what we did was bad. My point is
The
that
constraints are going down.
the constraints we are the ones who have to break those constraints to go down. And you have to provide that real additionality, and I think that's
No, I
That's
absolutely.
where we
So
go.
one of the things, right, is just amazing. This topic itself is so amazing and can go on for a while. But one of the things to just add to the interesting point you bring in, the CT scan or the X-ray or the MRI that we see today, actually whatever it has captured, we cannot say with certainty that we've read everything about it.
Yep.
Right? It's just that our ability to detect is the limitation.
Sure.
All we know is tomorrow an AI helps to see the same CT scan with different biomarkers in it,
Sure.
which changes the whole disease pathway and the care
Absolutely.
pathway because of that.
exactly.
Right? And that changes the entire game.
Absolutely.
Right? All you know is an X-ray is enough, and you don't need a CT. Because you are able to see for certain diseases, because there is certain biomarkers, and the profilation of that is very different.
I think that sometimes we think about radiology too much as images. If you really think about what radiology is, it is that final image that comes up is only a representation so that us humans can understand.
Correct.
The actual
Exactly.
the actual
The limitation is the detection.
The actual machine output in a radiology thing is case-based data, right? Essentially, if you take the image
So much
and
to interpret.
you do an FFT on it, you will get back frequency domain. Frequency domain is much more mathematical than visual domain, right? So a lot of, for example, some of the work that we are doing is what can you see on frequency domain that you essentially lose when you convert frequency domain
Image.
into visual domain.
Yeah.
So
What's in the slice actually?
What is the actual case-based knowledge, right? So building on that, I think is something that radiology has missed so far, right? We are so obsessed with this idea that my AI can see just like a human can, that we sometimes forget that, hey, your AI can see way other things that a human has no idea about, like frequency, case-based domain data.
And that takes to probably the last part of the discussion. One, at least, definitely I wanted to cover was the AI part a little more. And the future in terms of that part. And I think we did talk some exciting future anyways, but from a tech perspective, and now I'm going to call Sudhir from a wisdom perspective, because I've realized that he's like...
He's the guru.
So from a tech paradigm, one of the critical questions is, and that goes back to a global discussion, I think the whole fun of someone like 5C, of course, India also will be profitable, but the whole fun will be to go global, right? And really take this at a different scale altogether. But when you look at an AI company global, wanting to go global, the current paradigm is so much biased towards US doing anything big, right? Anything big is US is doing it, while India is not has been, apart from a couple of examples, able to kind of go big. But it's to their defense, it's still a very young place. So obviously there will be examples, but it's still there. Like US has many more AI firms breaking out scale relatively than any other part of the world. Coming from India, going and breaking these barriers, and in today's world where the AI, especially from the context of AI, the other part I can understand, but from an AI perspective, the competition are this hugely funded big firms coming and crushing a lot of this AI stuff and models and foundational application, all of that. How do you think an Indian firm should navigate something like this? And there are many Indian AI companies doing some very promising work as well.
Sure.
So what are your views on it? From a tech perspective, how much of this AI moat you can create which is narrow enough to defend? And from a wisdom perspective, if I go to, how do you see this entire macro elements and for an India player this panning out?
So
Right?
I'll quickly start, and then I'm also very curious.
Yeah, so you go first from a very tech question, AI question.
I'll start with like a couple of examples. If you look at Anthropic, if you look at ChatGPT, if you look at applied AI startups, 11 Labs, Whisperflow, etc. Today, their second biggest market has all become India, and in many cases, their largest user base has already become India. Why are they so Why are they so interested? Like this guy is in the US, right? Don't forget the dollar is getting stronger and stronger compared to the rupee. Why are these guys coming and trying to deploy so much in India? Because India has user base, India has scale, India has data, right? I look at it that there are essentially three narratives in AI. The US narrative is compute. You need more compute. Those 5-6 companies that have broken all barriers, etc., are essentially holding this whole S&P 500 completely, right? That's one. The China narrative is frugal innovation on architecture, on core architecture. So if you see what DeepSeek R1 had done.
No, China is a good thing. We should include China in the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a huge player.
So DeepSeek R1 was a great example of a novel and reasonably non-obvious way to think about managing existing algorithms to come up with something new.
And much cheaper.
And implementing that and actually getting to an outcome, right? So, and of course, there is Moonshot AI, there is DeepSeek, Alibaba, Quen, etc. And there's everybody's asking what is the India story here. My opinion here on the technical side is that India can lead in actually taking many of these applications all the way to the finish line, right? To give you an example, you have an open source, let's say a VLM, a vision language model, like a Quen, or maybe a medicine focused one, like maybe a MedGemma. These are very, very far from actual medical use, very far. But we have population scale data. We have the three important V's of data, right? You have volume, you have variety, you have veracity through deep annotations, skilled labor, etc. Can you use this and build on top of everything to actually be able to finally deliver an outcome? See, I don't want to get too much caught up on this whole, are you a rapper? And as I don't remember who the person was, but there's a famous saying, right? I think maybe it was Voltaire. If you want to make, probably not Voltaire, but there's a saying, right? If you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you first have to invent the universe. So there is nothing called from scratch, right? Like ChatGPT is a wrapper on NVIDIA, right? Like you can just keep going up on this, right? And so in the end is, can you build a moat that is a verb that will allow you to serve customers better? And I think India has a big opportunity because we have so much real life use case, so much valuable data, and the technical expertise to still manage this. Like, for example, our team, many teams in India have the capability of taking a quen and significantly fine-tuning it, parameterize, fine-tune it to ensure that it's working in real-life settings.
So if I understand this right, are you saying in a way, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I've got it wrong, you are saying through our application and work around that, and of course other aspects of business understanding, we can become, Indian AI companies can become reasonable global players. India players, so they will,
Of course.
I have no doubt. But will become reasonable global players, and still we'll be able to compete
absolutely.
because of whatever mode they have built, and as a verb, as you rightly said, they can continue to.
To give you an example, like DPDP allows of course, with very specific carve-outs and constraints, the collection of medical data very clearly stated in law, right? And how do you use it? How should you store it? What are the penalties for not doing it correctly? And that essentially means that the government is basically saying, hey, population scale data, totally anonymized population scale data is available as a essentially public good. If you are able to capture it, you can utilize it. Who else has this much data? Like we have read some 2.5 crore scans. Like there is no hospital.
Is there a diversity of data very important in the sense you have a lot of India data, and within India, of course, we have the diversity. But does that help you to build AI models that can go global, or you'll need a lot of global data?
No, see, you need global data much more importantly, one, to very specifically fine tune, and second, to capture disease burden. So, I see a chest X-ray of a person with, let's say, some bronchiovascular markings, etc. If it's a guy from Delhi, you don't call it. Everybody in Delhi has, some kind of minor lung pathology. The same thing you will call it in Los Angeles. You will call it, right?
Context is changed.
Context. And so the disease burden, for example, you would never call a TB in US. It does not exist.
Unlikely. Yeah.
It does not exist, right?
It does not exist.
You would, what here is,
I have learned there is only one place they do a lot of TB screening in US, and that's in jails.
Sure.
That's all.
Correct. But if you think about it, like you take a medical example, you have a consolidation in some lung, right? That consolidation could be water, it could be fluid, it could be pus, it could be blood, it could be cells, it could be anything. In India, the context of that consolidation is primarily infective etiology. In let's say the developed world, it is probably some kind of non-communicable disease, maybe some kind of cancer, right? You detect,
and then doctors are tuned to see in that manner. They're unlikely to detect TB there, though it might be there,
correct,
because they wouldn't think, TB hai.
Like a lesion, a brain lesion on an MRI in Australia is probably glioblastoma. The first differential diagnosis in India will be tuberculoma, not glioblastoma. The first thing you will say, this is probably a tuberculoma. Let us see, it could be a glioblastoma, right? So that's the way that you change context, and I think Indian medical AI could be a massive export opportunity because we just have the data and the talent to be able to do it.
Super. How do you see this? Overall forces from a global AI development and in general the AI hype or whatever we call it, how does those converge and how does an Indian player play along with that?
I think it's important for we as if we are using this whole geoposition of India, we should stop restricting ourselves. We are obsessed by these borders. Healthcare is a borderless requirement. And any good quality healthcare professional, clinician, technologist, capital invent, whatever, should view this slightly, a little more macro. And I think a big corona event indicates that when the new diseases come, and there are lots of coming, by the way, down the pike, like you said, because we have, the human race has not really understood the damage it is causing. Every geopolitical is actually converting itself into a health problem. Supply chain disruptions and wars have an impact on disease.
Yes.
which I think we are now data showing us actually with clarity. So the idea of the butterfly effect is on all of humanity. Nobody is going to be, sort of being able to mask themselves from it.
Yeah, can run away.
So, what AI will assist us, wherever the person is, it will assist in setting context, in understanding, like he said, understanding velocity, understanding variety, understanding volume, and of course, then the value that somebody pays is the impact it has on that revenue per person in that economy. Most, if you look at all health budgeting globally, which is substantively done by governments, and that's the way it should be done, because it should be pools looking after a potential disease and somebody in an asymmetric way as far as time is concerned. So it's critical for us to understand you can't deal with this issue without the notion of AI. You see, we don't rest our entire method around data, around context, around large models. What we will prepare, will make an error. It's just prone to error. You'll do a point solution and it will not help. It's just like pretty much in the whole drug development process, if we were trying to solve for one thing, we didn't think about how it might impact some other part, and then subsequently you have to pull off or pull out all the drugs from the shelves. A, B, you have to pay for liability that you didn't realize that there was another effect. And so the conceptual framework of what AI seeks to give us in all settings, not just healthcare, is the ability to think, in a very multidimensional way, and be able to use that multidimensional insight, context, to deliver a single point problem. So it's a very different approach. So you take a full value chain system, and then you redesign. You start to rethink ab initio, what are you solving for?
Yeah.
Right? So I think, and that is global. Now, the limits are based on our own constraints as we place them. It's like I would have placed the constraint also with him in the limited capital access that we had at that point of time. Focus, get this done in India. I would have just said it.
Yeah.
We could have well gone to Slovenia and done it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we were stopping ourselves. But I guess we make choices. Now, when you make a choice, it is basis some, parameters that you think will make you have the ability for you to live another day to make another choice. But I think in India right now, if you ask that broader question, we should try and at least imagine our role globally for global humanity. And not just, you might start here, you might start somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Don't need to hold yourself back.
Yeah.
There is one other point that's getting critical. That actually the idea of the borderless world that Rabindranath Tagore said is actually getting pushed out. We're going to be much more border-centric. And the last few years are showing that leadership and followership both want more tighter borders. In that context, sovereignty becomes a very important fact as to how will we solve for humanity with these issues.
Exactly.
That I may not be able to export my model tomorrow. I may not be able to import a model. I may not be able to export my drugs. I may not be able to import my drugs. There will be tariffs on intellect. There will be tariffs on goods in any case. And I think you have to compute that. Every entrepreneur or every business enterprise, whoever it is, every leader, must compute that idea. That if I'm seeking to improve my care delivery with all of these ways to deliver the care, I will be restricted, not maybe. I am already.
And you should be nimble enough to...
You have to therefore invent, innovate in a sovereign way as well.
Yeah.
and work
That's
with.
a very great
It's a
point,
very
right?
critical point that
Especially
health security,
current
food
scenario.
security, energy security, data compute security that we're all talking about. So all these theoretical security is now getting, it's going to change. So
Yeah.
take that into
Oh, that's a
cognizance.
fantastic point,
Take
yeah.
that into cognizance as you think next 10, 20 years.
So probably my last question and more that to you, Sudhir, more tactical question, but linked to what we have been talking about. And it's amazing at the fag end of it, we are saying, look at a borderless world from an humanity perspective, but at the same time prepare yourself to be sovereign enough and have those conditions applied. And one of the things is capital when it comes to something like that. Have you seen recently, you would know that better, we don't, at least I have not seen that data recently, but are you seeing less fund coming into India from, so many a times our sources of fund, not just in India, right? The sources of fund are from US, Japan, many other places.
Yeah.
Are you seeing less fund invested in this current geopolitical environment into India? A. B. Are we reacting and responding with higher domestic fund coming in from any places? What's the scenario from fund? How can we fund this tech and research ideas in this country like 5C? How can we continue to do that? What level of challenge is there in that?
I think if we keep our eyes and minds open, healthcare in specific, I think will receive more. Okay, broadly speaking, because we're going to be the new laboratory for the world.
Yeah.
I have zero doubt about that. So in the new, so the current status is that in the developed world, cost of building the new is prohibitive right now. It's prohibitive. Whether it's a new machine or a new drug or a new delivery system, it's become prohibitive. A. B. And therefore you have to look for an alternative. There's a cost problem, number one. Number two is talent at scale, right? So talent at scale, meaning when I'm solving for 7 billion people, then the talent pools that think 7 billion are fewer. It'll come back to India. We have close to 2,000 global captive centers, between Bangalore, Pune, Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Bombay, 6 cities. That's from Shell, wanting to know everything about polymer sciences, to Airbus to discuss aerodynamics, to GE Healthcare to talk about a healthcare machine,
All the way to Kaiser Permanente.
to get a Kaiser Permanente for service delivery systems. So what's interesting is that when I meet the talent pools here, they are not restricted. They are not constrained. They work for Europe, US, India, whatever it is. I think that changes our place substantially. If you look at drugs, 25 years ago, 35 years ago, when earlier in my life, we had small little subscale plants manufacturing formulations. Today it's not the same. Our CDMOs are global scale, serious global scale. Just the CDMO side.
Yeah.
Forget about the next level of factories, etc. We have probably amongst the largest number of FDA approved manufacturing facilities. So what we've done for the pills of the world, my belief is we can do for every element of the healthcare ecosystem at scale. The last time around, we didn't make money from the IP. We mostly did stuff on off-patent in generics. I think the next wave has to be
we
build the
capitalize
models,
that.
we build IP, and that then can also get you a fair share of the profit pool, which will allow you to really get back to what you're saying. Will that allow for more capital to come because that's got better economics, better return on capital employed, simple. So what is capital? It's very fungible.
Yeah.
And as long as we don't close borders, and we're more open about it, capital will be fungible, undoubtedly.
Super. That's a great place to end. I mean, great tech vision, great capital optimism in terms of the way coming, and amazing wisdom from the overall perspective. Thank you so much
Thank you, Amit.
for joining this, and it was a fantastic conversation.
Thanks, Amit,
Thank
for
you
having
very
us.
much.
Glad to be
Thanks.
here.